There's something fascinating about how humans are drawn to things they were never meant to conquer, like standing on water, racing alongside the ocean's raw force, and balancing on the edge of chaos without falling in. Surfing has always been more than just a sport. For some, it's a quiet rebellion. For others, a form of meditation. And for many, a test of survival and spirit, a way to measure themselves against something far bigger. But where did this all begin? Who were the first to look at a breaking wave and see not danger, but possibility? Nobody knows the exact moment when surfing was born, but its roots reach deep into the heart of Polynesia, a vast ocean world where land is scattered across thousands of kilometers of water. More than 1,000 years ago, these expert navigators settled islands like Tahiti, Samoa, Tonga, and eventually Hawaii, bringing with them their canoes, their gods, their stories, and their waves. Surfing wasn't invented overnight. It likely began with body surfing, then riding waves on small planks or canoe hulls, slowly evolving into the stand-up art we know today. But nowhere did surfing flourish like it did in Hawaii. In ancient Hawaiian society, surfing was called he'e nalu, meaning wave sliding. And it wasn't just a pastime, it was a pillar of culture. Chiefs and nobles known as ali'i were the masters of the waves, riding the biggest boards on the best beaches, sometimes boards up to 5 meters long and weighing over 70 kilometers. Commoners surfed too, though often on smaller, lighter boards. But this wasn't just about fun. Surfing was a way to prove your skill, your strength, your courage. It was tied to mana, the spiritual energy that shaped Hawaiian life. A good surfer didn't just ride waves, they communed with the ocean, reading its moods, respecting its power, and sometimes asking for its blessing through prayers and offerings before heading out. Even making a board was an act of connection. Hawaiians would select special trees like koa or wili, sometimes offering fish or cloth to the gods before cutting them down. The shaping process involved stone adzes, coral tools, sanding with shark skin, and oiling with kui nut oil until the wood gleamed. Boards had names, stories, sometimes even reputations passed from surfer to surfer. There were no fins, no leashes, no surf wax, just you, the heavy wooden board, and the raw energy of the Pacific. Surfers paddled out with their bare hands, waited patiently, and then, with perfect timing, launched themselves onto the moving wall of water, standing tall, racing toward shore in a dance between balance and power. To surf was to master yourself and the sea. And on the islands, the best surfers were legends, raised in chants, songs, and oral histories that carried their names far beyond the beach. In 1778, the first crack appeared on the horizon. A pair of British ships under Captain James Cook, cutting through the Pacific, guided by maps the Polynesian had never needed. When Cook's men anchored off the Hawaiian coast, they were astonished by what they saw. Dozens of locals, naked or near naked, gliding across the waves on long wooden boards, laughing, cheering, some wiping out spectacularly, only to paddle back out for more. But fascination would soon turn to something colder. In the early 1800s, Christian missionaries arrived, determined to civilize the Hawaiian people. They brought schools, churches, and a worldview that saw the local customs, especially those tied to the body, to pleasure, and to pagan rituals, as dangerous. Surfing, once a royal art and communal joy, now came under attack. It wasn't just the near nakedness on the beach. It was the time wasted in play, the connection to old gods, the social mixing of men and women in the waves. The missionaries called for moral reform, and the chiefs, weakened by disease, foreign influence, and economic shifts, began to listen. At the same time, Hawaii was being reshaped by forces far beyond its beaches. Western disease like smallpox and measles swept through the islands, devastating the native population. By the mid-1800s, some estimates suggest Hawaii had lost up to 80% of its people. Entire families, communities, lineages, gone. Land ownership changed too. Once communal, Hawaiian land was increasingly divided, sold, and fenced off, often to foreign sugar and cattle companies. Sacred beaches were privatized or developed. Access to traditional surf spots became limited, sometimes entirely cut off. Even the knowledge of board making began to fade. The old craftsmen died without apprentices. The prayers and rituals tied to shaping a board were no longer passed down. What had once been a living tradition became a faint memory. By the late 19th century, surfing was no longer a mass pastime or a royal sport. It was barely surviving. A few diehards at Waikiki and scattered beaches kept the practice alive, sometimes dismissed as relics or novelties. For most outsiders, surfing was just another quaint native custom, destined to fade away under the tide of westernization. At the turn of the 20th century, surfing was a shadow of what it had been. On most Hawaiian beaches, the old olo boards were gone. The chance silence, the beaches crowded not with surfers but tourists. But on the sands of Waikiki, a small group of locals, beach boys, fishermen, lifeguards, were still riding the waves, keeping the art alive. And at the center of it all stood Duke Kaha Namoku. Born in 1890 in Honolulu, Duke was part of a generation caught between two worlds. Raised with Hawaiian traditions, but living under the growing influence of the American presence on the islands. Tall, athletic, and graceful in the water, Duke quickly rose to fame as a swimmer, setting world records and earning a spot on the U.S. Olympic team. At the 1912 Stockholm Olympics, Duke stunned the world, winning gold in the 100-meter freestyle and instantly becoming a national hero. But not just for swimming. Whenever Duke traveled, whether to California, Australia, or the East Coast, he brought something else, his surfboard. In exhibitions after his races, Duke would carry his long wooden board, sometimes borrowed, sometimes homemade, into the waves, wowing onlookers by standing tall as he slid across the surf. To crowds who had never seen anything like that, Duke became the living face of an almost mythical sport. But Duke wasn't the only one. In California, George Freeth, another Hawaiian-born surfer, was already giving wave-riding demonstrations, earning the nickname the man who walks on water. In Australia, young lifeguards eagerly copied Duke's moves, building boards of their own, falling, learning, getting back up. Back home, groups like Hui Nalu, one of the first formal surf clubs, were organizing surfing as a community again, holding contests, teaching kids, reviving old knowledge. Waikiki became the heart of this rebirth, a mix of locals, tourists, and adventurers all drawn to the waves. And slowly, surfing began to change. Boards were redesigned, experimenting with shapes and materials. The heavy olo and alea gave way to lighter, faster designs. Surfing moved from ritual to recreation, from spiritual practice to competitive sport, but it never entirely lost its original magic. By the 1920s and 30s, surfing had taken root in California, in Australia, in South Africa. No longer just a Hawaiian tradition, but a global movement. And at its center remained Duke, not only as a champion athlete, but as a symbol, a Hawaiian who carried the ocean's story out into the world and helped write the first chapter of modern surfing. By the mid-20th century, surfing had taken root beyond Hawaii's shores, but no one could have predicted just how big it was about to become. In California, a generation of young surfers was carving out a new identity along the Pacific coast. Soldiers returning from World War II had been stationed in Hawaii, where many first encountered surfing. Back home, they brought with them not just stories, but a hunger for waves. Technology was changing fast. Traditional wooden boards, often over 3 meters long and weighing 50 kilos or more, were replaced with foam and fiberglass designs, lighter, faster, easier to maneuver. The invention of surf wax improved grip. The development of the wetsuit opened up cold water surf spots once considered unrideable. Suddenly, surfing wasn't just tropical, it was global. In the 1950s and 60s, surf culture exploded into the mainstream. Hollywood churned out beach party films like Gidget and Beach Blanket Bingo, romanticizing the laid-back, sun-kissed life of California surfers. The Beach Boys sang of surfboards, fast cars, and endless summers, turning the soundtrack of surfing into an international phenomenon. Magazines like Surfer and Surfing emerged, packed with photos of perfect waves, heroic wipeouts, and stories of exotic breaks from around the world. Surf shops popped up in beach towns, selling not just boards, but an entire lifestyle. Board shorts, sunglasses, sandals, slogans, dreams. But beneath the glossy surface, surfing carried an undercurrent of rebellion. Many early surfers rejected the suburban mold, skipping work or school when the waves were good, chasing an existence defined by tides, not clocks. Meanwhile, Australia was undergoing its own surf revolution, blending local grit with Hawaiian influence. Spots like Bondi Beach, Bells Beach, and the Gold Coast became magnets for surfers pushing the limits, forming tight-knit communities with their own codes and legends. By the 1970s, professional surfing circuits were taking shape, sponsored contests were drawing crowds, and surfers like Mark Richards and Sean Thompson were becoming household names in the surf world. But not everyone welcomed the shift. Some surfers saw the rise of big money, big brands, and media attention as a threat to the soul of the sport. Today, surfing is everywhere, from icy Irish coast to Indonesian reefs, from California's crowded breaks to Brazil's wild shores. What began as a sacred tradition in Polynesia has become a global sport, an Olympic event, and a billion-dollar industry. Big wave legends ride giants at Nazare and Jaws, while local surfers paddle out at dawn for a few quiet moments before work. The World Surf League crowns world champions, surf brands fill shopping malls, and social media floods with clips of perfect barrels and brutal wipeouts. But fame brings challenges. Coral reefs are dying, coastlines are eroding, and many once remote surf spots are choked with crowds. Climate change isn't an abstract worry here, it's reshaping the waves themselves. And yet, something deeper is stirring. Across the world, surfers are reconnecting with the ocean, not just as athletes, but as caretakers, blending tradition, activism, and passion. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting content just like this.